Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I'm going to present my paper that is Supply and Demand of Construction Safety Measures in Developing Countries. I'm Dr. Rita E. Manley from Hong Kong Xi'an University. I obtained my both the undergraduate and also postgraduate degree from the University of Hong Kong. This picture shows the developing and also developed countries worldwide. So you will be able to see the advanced economy here in North America, in Australia, in Japan, and also Korea. And other parts, like for example the orange and the red areas, are actually the developing countries, mainly located in Asia, Africa, and South America, which is actually less developed or least developed. So these are actually the developing countries, which is actually, generally speaking, they are less affluent, less rich than those developed countries. So some of the economic characteristics in developing countries, apart from whether they are rich or not, on average, the developing countries are efficiency-driven economies, while the developed ones are mainly innovation-driven economies. So actually, as the economy develops, emphasizes on industrial activities switch towards the service sector. So they no longer depends on agricultural or other sectors, but more related to the human sector. Now, in construction sector, it firstly grows in less developed country, which is the apex on newly industrialized country, and eventually drops in advanced industrialization. It is actually very easy to understand. So say for instance, when a country is developing, they lack of some of the infrastructure like bridges, like tunnel. But by the time that they have constructed bridges, tunnel, bridges, and other infrastructure, they no longer need to build any. And therefore, construction activity or construction industry play less role later on. So that what you see here is actually upward curve shape. So the role of the construction industry in developing countries, here I want to shed light on China and Mexico. Construction industry is actually a vital sector of social economy around the developing countries, as it hires large workforce, generates much income, and enhances the economic development. For example, in China, the industry share 5 to 7% of the GDP and nearly 4% of social employment. In Mexico, the construction sector represents 7% of the total value of services and goods. So demand of the construction safety measures in the developing world. Some of the construction projects are more dangerous. Say for instance, demolition, dam building, tunnel boring. They're actually very high risk and death and injury. But the major problem in developing world is that actually, because they are less rich than those countries of like for example the developed countries in the US, for example, where first of all technology is better in developed countries, where the workers are receive much more education, and therefore they have a very strong they know how to protect themselves better than those developing workers in developing world. So in developing world, the major problem is by the time that they have much more complex infrastructure projects, like for example dam building. For the developed countries, after they build the dam, for a long time they do not need to do it again. But for the developing world, the lack of all these kinds of the infrastructure, coupled with a higher risk of death and injury because of poor education, because of less educated workers, then it becomes much more serious, and therefore actually there's a very strong demand in construction safety measures in those countries. So major safety problems, for example, let us see, for example, like in Ghana and Kuwait. Now, in developing countries like Ghana, reported that 56 out of 1,120 construction accidents were fatal. So it means that a lot of people actually die because of their working on construction sites, which is actually a lot higher than the International Labour Organization's estimation for the developing countries. In Kuwait, construction industry is also one of the most hazardous in the. So actually, it is a very dangerous job in the developing country, and the cost it can be very high. Say for instance, it may lead to the loss of trained and experienced workers. Construction accidents often lead to higher insurance costs, loss in productivity, and also disruption in work progress. We can imagine that by the time the workers have got the accidents, then they have to apply for leave, and then some of the workers who have very good skills, who are very well trained because of the working by doing, and therefore actually when the time that they lost their that they cannot return to the work, this means that we have lost our training time. Okay, we have to train another new group of the workers from scratch, and therefore we actually lost a lot of money in training. And then for the high insurance costs, okay, why there is a high insurance cost? Because by the time that construction accidents happened, then you have to pay the insurance. Then the next time, by the time you have to renew your insurance contract, the risk assessed by the insurance company in having the construction accidents will also be waived, and therefore the insurance company will try to charge these companies a higher cost than before. And then there is also loss in productivity and disruption to work progress, mainly because of the fact that you have some of the government officials, they have to be involved to record the problem, to interview some of the workers, to interview some of the employers, to know what happened there. Ultimately, maybe 1 day or 2 days or 3 days that are lost because of the investigation for the accidents. All these actually provide some kind of the economic incentives to prevent accidents, and so as a demand for various safety measures. We will study 5 developing countries' safety measures, namely Bermuda, China, Ghana, Kuwait, and Egypt. Among all of them, China was the country with the highest GDP in 2001. So here you see the 4 countries, the GDP and also GDP per capita. You will notice that actually among all of them, Ghana has the lowest GDP amount per capita among all. It means that people on average, they are poorest among all. Okay, the money that they earn is less than the others. Among the 5 areas, those who are in Kuwait, actually they earn a larger sum of money. But then because Kuwait, even though they are a lot richer, but why we regard them as still a developing country? Because apart from the oil industry, there is no other industries, and there are no other industries, first of all. Secondly is that Kuwait actually suffered from the war, which lasts for very long time, and therefore there isn't much very good infrastructure, and then still it fall into even though that it is a lot better than other countries, but then still it is classified as developing countries. So for the first country that we will study is Bermuda. Bermuda is very famous for the Bermuda Triangle, but apart from that, actually Bermuda is located, is an island country located and then next to the New York City, geographically speaking. So for these buildings, actually they are low-rise buildings. They are not the high-rise building that we see in the developed cities. So what you see is that a lot of the buildings are actually low-rise, or 3 stories or less. The National Training Board, the Construction Association of Bermuda, craft and apprenticeship training provide the directions and oversight of the construction safety. It is a mandatory requirement that all the apprentices and trainees should register with the CAOB and attend the safety classes. Apprentices and other employers are bound by the conditions and terms issued by the National Training Board Act and all the subsequent amendments. So in Kuwait, stood highest in GDP per capita due to a relative low population. So we see that actually why it is rich, okay, per capita per person, because it actually has a very low population as compared to places like China. So as Kuwait is still recovering from the destruction of war and economic activities, it is still limited on the oil industries as mentioned before. It remains in the list of developing countries. But then what you see here is that Kuwait, for the buildings, they are much more higher rise as compared to the previous one. So in Kuwait, one thing that is very unique is that because in Kuwait it is quite hot, so actually workers are prohibited to work from 12 to 16 in June, July, and August. So it tries to prevent workers from dehydration due to summer's hot weather. Because a lot of the countries, especially those in the developing countries where they are located in the hot weather region, they have this kind of the arrangement, such that by the time the workers fainted because of the hot water, the workers that they dehydrated during the hot water, it may lead to much more serious incidents or accidents. For example, falling from the high area, so that they actually have this kind of the arrangement. Construction injuries in Kuwait are actually classified into 3 types: death, injuries, and permanent disability. So permanent disabled workers are compensated according to the percentage of disability. Maximum compensation is salary of 2,000 days or about 48,000 US dollars, whichever is greater. In case of death, the worker is entitled to maximum amount of the 36,000 US dollars or full pay of the 1,500 days. Insurance in Kuwait covers most of the injuries, as the competition among the insurance companies is quite high. Okay. So on-site safety standards are listed in the conditions of contract, so they may follow the OSHA regulation, the British standards, or Kuwait safety standards. Unfortunately, the Kuwait safety standards do not comply with the international standards and codes. Moreover, the Workers' Affairs Department fails to provide detailed reports of the accidents, and therefore, actually, the workers and senior management cannot learn from mistakes easily. So, if they, for example, they can learn from previous mistake, of course, they can teach the workers how to avoid. For example, some accidents like fall from the high area, like other types of accidents, how they can prevent it. Unfortunately, if there is poor record, they cannot learn it. So in case of China, now China is actually a very developing country with a lot of the high-rise buildings. The major reason is China, it has got a densely populated areas. A lot of people are there, and then therefore the buildings are getting higher and higher. So there are a lot of skyscrapers over there. Now for the management methods on the documents of production safety, it just states the needs for the site safety inspections. It encourages the construction practitioners to take photographs of unsafe production and subsequently submit the safety information online. Besides, 4 emergency programs were launched from 2003 to 2005. They include the emergency plan on production safety, acute occupational poisoning, fire protection, and acute occupational disease. So the regulation on the Safety and License Decree number 397 of the State Council came into force on January 13th of 2004. It mandatorily requires the contractors to establish and improve the work safety system, and ensure that safety training is provided to workers. Because a lot of the accidents in China, the major reason is the workers' lack of safety training. They do not know what actually are the safety problem there, and then they do not realize the results of the accidents, and therefore training was provided. Here they try to stress the importance of training here, and then it also improves the work safety system and provides a professional safety management staff. And some people, because previously China is not privately, a lot of the companies, they are actually not privately owned, so they lack of this kind of the safety management staff, and then this regulations, it try to provide some guidelines that they have to provide this kind of the people. They have to that they know how to manage the safety issues. It also mandatorily require the insurance premiums for the employees and buy the employment injury insurances in order to according to regulations. Supervisors identifies evaluates major hazard at site at work safety condition according to law. Starting from 2007, a video was used in the safety training to let the workers understand the safety issues. A collection of playing cards with safety skills, knowledge, and tips shown at the back remind workers to work safely. Besides, a series of safety promotion campaigns were implemented to strengthen the safety training. For example, March is identified as a safety education month. Okay, so this is something new as in China. But of course, what we will perceive is that, as they are getting more and more mobile phone, maybe possibly, another step is maybe mobile phone apps. It can be used in the safety education later on. In case of Ghana, so where is Ghana? You can look at the figure here, which is located in Africa, somewhere in the green area. In case of Ghana, owing to a thriving democracy, commitment to good governance, development of private sector, Ghana experiences a rapid economic growth of the past 10 years, and is presently seen as one of the fastest growing economies in sub-Saharan Africa. And then construction contributes to up to 8.8% of the gross domestic product and highest 1.4% of the country's labor force, with a significant proportion of the formal. There are actually 5 ministries responsible for OHS in Ghana: Factory Inspectorate Department, the Labor Department, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Attorney General's Department, and Occupational Health Service Unit. Safety regulations are scattered in many rules and regulations in the Mining Regulations, Labor Act, and Environmental Protection Agency Act. So there is actually a lack of careful planning in OHS statutes development, resulting in fragmentation, overlapping, and inconsistencies in OHS laws. Say for instance, some of the law may say that this is allowed, but then the other laws they say that this is prohibited. So it actually has got it leads to some kind of the argument whether this is prohibited or not. It also poorly divides the safety responsibilities of the government, employees, and employees in the safety issues. So what actually they are responsible for. Now, if it is not clearly stated, then some people will say that this is not my duty. Okay, this is the duty of the government, this is the duty of the employees, but not the duty of mine as an employer. Many illiterate workers are not covered by the insurance schemes. Similar to other countries, that the workers in construction industry, they are illiterate, they are poorly educated. Unfortunately, the workers are not covered by the insurance schemes. And many construction companies rely on temporary workforce. Many of them, they do not belong to any labor unions. A labor union is actually one of the organizations for which the workers usually they can find some people to help them to apply for compensation, and then to find some people to help them to advocate, to voice out their problem to the society, to the legal regulators, legal drafters, and also lawyers. Unfortunately, if they do not belong to any of the workforce, then some people will say that, well, you do not belong to our labor unions, or we cannot help you. The government say that, well, it is also not my duties to supervise the safety issues. The employers, of course, they want to make money. Why do they need to provide you some extra safety measures? So under these circumstances, the employees become the most vulnerable groups for which nobody can help them. In Egypt, okay, so Egypt is also another country in Africa, and then in North Africa. So Egypt is one of the earliest civilization, and then but then the major problem is safety measures in Egypt is now not very well developed. The Ministry of the Labor Force and Training enforces the safety regulations. Employees, however, they do not need to inform the employees about the safety issues and standards, which is actually quite ridiculous, because they provide some kind of the directions that you have to do this and you have to do that, but then they have no responsibilities to inform the employees about the safety issues and standards, so that you can imagine what kind of the problems will exist under the circumstances. Small-scale companies with 15 to 49 workers only need to provide a summary on injuries, illness, and grave accidents. They do not need to keep detailed information for which the accidents which happened over the past 6 months. This is also another major problem. If you do not need to keep the detailed information, then how can the workers learn from the safety issues, learn from the accidents, learn from the mistakes? Under these circumstances, of course, a lot of the workers also suffer. Only those companies with more than 50 workers have to provide detailed information about individual accidents. Accident statistics are not posted on sites where and there is no safety inspection done by the safety officers to ensure the enforcement of safety provisions. Penalties for construction accidents are quite low and inadequate, ranging from $4 to $9. Well, you can imagine if you have only got like $4 to $9 per violation. So why do then I need to provide the safety measures? Possibly, if I want to provide some kind of the training, it already exists, like for example $10 or $20. Under these circumstances, then of course the employers, they actually have a very low incentive to provide this kind of the protection to the employees. Employees' rights in safety issues are also limited. Say for instance, employees cannot exercise their rights and commit on safety standard or request for the safety inspection, okay, which is actually also quite very ridiculous. So as conclusion, in developing countries, construction industry is very important in economic development because they actually hire a lot of people, hire a lot of workers. Because developing countries, they usually have a very huge demand for the infrastructure, like for example bridges, like for example dams, like for example tunnels, where there is no this kind of the infrastructure before, and therefore it is very important in the economic development, for even for the transportation or for other thing else. But then what we know is safety regulations are poorly designed or enforced. And then we also notice that there is differences between the economic situation and also the employment and also the protection or the construction safety measures. Say for instance in Kuwait, which is a lot much more richer, relatively speaking, among these five. They are the richest among all. And then in Kuwait, there is a high accident compensation where the workers are much more better protected. But in case of Egypt, there's the last one. So if the companies that they violate the safety measures, they only need to pay like $4 to $9. Of course, there is a large gap there. What you see is that in Kuwait, actually for the workers is much more better protected. But then in the poorest country, like for example, not the poorest but a little bit poorer, Egypt, that the workers are less protected. And then accident compensation, even though, okay, no matter what, even in like Kuwait or Egypt or China, and so on, like accident compensation is still limited. The supply of the effective safety measures failed to meet the demand in developing countries, because we see that, well, in developed countries they have less construction activities, but then in the developing countries they have a lot of more construction activities, but then the safety measures they actually fail to protect these workers. So end of the presentation today. So if you wish to know more about the construction safety, you can read the book Construction Safety, which is written by Dr. E. Manley and Dr. Samwa Poon, published by Springer in 2013. Thank you.